I am Kaylee Parker, 30 years old, and 11 years ago my life took a turn I never expected. Back then, I was just 19, standing in our family's polished living room in Seattle, still wearing my cap and gown from high school graduation. But instead of congratulations, I was met with humiliation. My father's voice, cold as steel, said, "You will never be one of us." My mother nodded, avoiding my eyes, while my sister let out a mocking laugh, cutting deeper than their words. In that moment, they turned their backs and disowned me, because I wasn't the elegant, glamorous daughter they wanted for their fashion empire. I wasn't the princess in silk. I was the dreamer, the coder, the one who chose circuits over couture. That night, I packed a small bag and walked out of that house. Their rejection burned like fire, but it also lit a flame inside me, the will to rise to prove my worth. 11 years later, I was no longer the outcast. I had built a tech empire from nothing, becoming a CEO, whose name they could no longer ignore. Then came the invitation, the 25th anniversary gala of their fashion company. They had no idea the daughter they cast aside would return, not to beg, but to face them and to show the world what they had thrown away. The gala would be my stage, their empire, my audience, and the truth, my weapon. What came next would shake their perfect little world to its core. Before I share my story, tell me what time it is and which city you're watching from, so I'll know just how far this story has reached. And share your feelings, because your voice matters here. The night of my high school graduation still burns in my memory. I was 19, standing in our family's Seattle mansion, my diploma clutched tight. I'd just told my parents I wanted to study computer science, not join their fashion empire. My sister Aria Parker leaned against the staircase, her eyes glinting with mockery. "You think you're smart enough for that?" she sneered, flipping her hair. My father, a towering figure in a tailored suit, didn't even look at me. "You're a disappointment," he said, his voice sharp enough to cut glass. I stood frozen, hoping my mother would step in. She didn't. Her silence was louder than his words. Later that night, I overheard Dad talking to a business partner in his study. "Kaylee's a failure," he said, not bothering to lower his voice. "She'll never amount to anything." Aria's laughter drifted through the door, each chuckle a jab to my chest. I confronted them, my voice shaking. "Why can't you support me?" Dad's face hardened. "You don't belong in this family," he said. Mom just stared at the floor. Aria smirked, arms crossed. That was it. They told me to leave, to never come back. I packed a duffel bag and walked out into the rain, my dreams heavier than my suitcase. I ended up in a cramped apartment in Silicon Valley, barely scraping by. My first coding job paid next to nothing, but I poured my heart into it. Rejection from my family fueled me. I spent nights teaching myself programming, debugging lines of code until my eyes stung. I took online courses, hustled for freelance gigs, and networked with anyone who'd listen. Failure wasn't an option, not because I wanted to prove them wrong, but because I had to prove myself right. By 25, I'd landed a job at a startup, learning the ropes of the tech world. I soaked up every lesson, every failure, every late-night coffee run. 3 years ago, I took a leap and founded my own company, a tech platform that revolutionized how small businesses manage data. It wasn't easy. Investors doubted me, competitors tried to undercut me, and self-doubt crept in more times than I'd admit. But I kept going. My team grew, my platform thrived, and last year it hit a valuation of $50 million. I wasn't just surviving, I was winning. My name, Kaylee, started appearing in tech magazines, places my family would never look. They didn't know the girl they'd called a failure was now a CEO, someone who'd built something from nothing. The invitation to their company's 25th anniversary gala came out of nowhere. I was in my San Francisco office, staring at the embossed card, my past rushing back like a tidal wave. I hadn't spoken to my family in 11 years. Why now? Did they think I'd crawl back, begging for their approval? I wasn't that girl anymore. I called Samantha Reed, my best friend from college, who'd seen me through my darkest days. We met at a cafe near my office, the hum of the city around us. "You're really going back?" she asked, her eyes wide. I nodded, sipping my coffee. "Not to reconcile," I said. "To show them who I am." Samantha leaned forward, her voice steady. "You've built an empire, Kaylee. They don't get to define you anymore." Her words hit hard, grounding me. She reminded me of the nights I'd cried over code, the days I'd doubted myself, and how far I'd come. "Go in there and own it," she said. I smiled, feeling a spark of courage. The gala was in Seattle, their turf, but I wasn't walking in as their daughter. I was Kaylee, the woman who'd turned their rejection into rocket fuel. I booked my flight that night, my resolve hardening. They'd see me again, but this time it'd be on my terms. The Seattle Conference Center was buzzing when I walked in. The chandeliers gleamed overhead, and the crowd dressed in sleek suits and elegant gowns hummed with anticipation for the Parker family's 25th anniversary gala. I wore a tailored black dress, my hair pulled back to show the confidence I'd earned over 11 years. Heads turned as I crossed the room, my heels clicking against the marble floor. Whispers followed me, but I kept my eyes forward, scanning for the family that had cast me out. I wasn't here to blend in. I was here to stand out. Aria stood near the stage, her role as director of marketing evident in her poised smile and designer dress. Our eyes met, and her face froze for a split second before she forced a tight-lipped grin. She recognized me instantly, Kaylee, the sister she'd mocked and discarded. I held her gaze, my expression calm but unyielding. She adjusted her necklace, pretending to chat with a guest, but I saw her hands tremble. She hadn't expected me to show up, let alone look like I belonged in her world. I moved through the crowd, feeling her stare burn into my back. A man approached me, his smile warm but curious. "I'm Sean Ellis, Aria's husband," he said, extending a hand. I shook it, noting the genuine interest in his eyes. "You seem familiar." "Have we met?" he asked. I tilted my head, letting a faint smile play on my lips. "Maybe in another life," I replied, my voice steady but laced with meaning. Sean's brow furrowed, but he didn't press. Instead, he gestured toward the bar. "Care to join me for a drink?" I nodded, sensing an opportunity to plant a seed of doubt about his wife's perfect facade. As we walked, I caught sight of Dad across the room, his broad shoulders squared as he shook hands with a group of men in suits. He hadn't seen me yet, but his presence stirred a knot in my stomach. Mom stood beside him, her practiced smile masking the tension I knew she carried. They were the picture of success, the heads of a fashion empire, but I knew the cracks beneath their polished surface. I turned away, focusing on Sean. "So you're part of the Parker legacy now?" I asked, keeping my tone light. He chuckled, unaware of the storm brewing. "Trying to keep up," he said. "Aria runs a tight ship." At the bar, I ordered a sparkling water, my mind sharp. A group of investors approached, their faces lighting up when I introduced myself as the CEO of a tech platform they'd read about. "Your work on data integration is impressive," one said, handing me his card. I thanked him, my confidence growing as their interest deepened. We talked numbers, innovation, and the future of tech, topics I knew Dad would never touch. Aria watched from a distance, her smile faltering as she realized I wasn't just a guest. I was a threat. Sean stayed close, asking about my company. "How'd you get into tech?" he said, his curiosity genuine. I leaned in, my voice low. "Sometimes you have to break free from what people expect to find your own path." His eyes lingered on me, sensing there was more to my story. I didn't elaborate, letting the mystery hang. Across the room, Mom whispered something to Dad, her gaze flicking toward me. George's jaw tightened as he finally spotted me, his eyes narrowing. I raised my glass slightly, a silent challenge. They thought they'd erased me, but I was here commanding attention. The investors invited me to their table, eager to discuss a potential partnership. I joined them, laying out my vision for scaling my platform. Their nods and questions fueled my drive, each word a step toward dismantling the Parker family's illusion of control. Aria hovered nearby, pretending to mingle, but I caught her stealing glances, her composure cracking. Sean excused himself to check on her, and I saw them exchange hushed words. Mom approached Dad, her hand gripping his arm as they watched me hold court. Their unease was palpable, a crack in their perfect world. I didn't need their approval anymore, but I wanted them to see what they'd lost. The gala was just the beginning. I'd built my own empire, and tonight I was planting the seeds to shake theirs. George and Ellen could feel it, something was coming, and I was the one bringing it. As the gala reached its peak, I stepped onto the stage. The spotlight hit me, and the crowd's chatter faded to a hush. My heart pounded, but my voice was steady as I gripped the microphone. "Good evening," I said, scanning the sea of faces at the Parker family's 25th anniversary gala. "I'm Kaylee, and I have a story to share." The room stilled, every eye locked on me. I paused, letting the weight of my presence sink in. This wasn't just a speech. This was the moment I'd waited 11 years for. I was raised in the shadow of this empire. I began my words clear and deliberate. But I was never part of it. My family chose to cast me out because I didn't fit their mold. Gasps rippled through the audience. I didn't name them yet, but I saw Aria, my sister, clutching her glass, her face pale. She stood near the front, her eyes wide with panic. I continued, my tone even but piercing. They thought I'd fade away, a nobody who dared to dream differently. But here I am, leading a tech company that's changing the game. The crowd murmured, some nodding, others whispering. I caught Dad's stare from the side, his fists clenched. George Parker. The man who'd called me a failure looked like he'd seen a ghost. I didn't flinch. "Success isn't about fitting in," I said. "It's about standing up even when those closest to you tear you down." The room erupted in applause, but Aria's expression crumbled. She pushed through the crowd, trying to reach the stage, her heels clicking frantically. I kept going, my voice rising. "I'm here tonight, not for approval, but to remind everyone that your worth isn't defined by those who reject you." The applause grew louder, and I saw investors from earlier nodding, their interest piqued. Aria reached the steps, her voice sharp but shaky. "This isn't your place," she hissed low enough that only I could hear. I met her gaze, unyielding. "It's exactly my place." I shot back, my words firm. The crowd didn't hear our exchange, but they saw her tension, her desperate attempt to hold her ground. She retreated, her face flushed as Sean approached her. His brow furrowed, confusion etched across his features. He glanced at me, then back at Aria, his hand on her arm. "What's going on?" he asked her, his tone sharp. She brushed him off, muttering something about a misunderstanding, but he wasn't convinced. I stepped back from the microphone, the crowd still clapping. Sean broke away from Aria and approached me as I descended the stage. "Kaylee, what did you mean up there?" he asked, his voice low but urgent. I leaned in, keeping my tone calm but pointed. "Ask your wife about the sister she doesn't talk about," I said. His eyes narrowed, a flicker of doubt crossing his face. He glanced back at Aria, who was now whispering to Mom near the bar. Ellen's face was tight, her usual composure fraying. Sean didn't move, his gaze locked on me, waiting for more. I didn't give it to him, not yet. Mom pushed through the crowd, her smile forced as she reached me. "You need to leave," she said, her voice low but firm, her hand grazing my arm. I pulled back, meeting her eyes. "I'm not going anywhere." "Ellen," I said, using her name to draw a line. The crowd nearby quieted, sensing the tension. She froze, her lips parting as if to argue, but I turned away, addressing an investor who'd approached me. "Your speech was inspiring," he said, shaking my hand. "We need to talk business." I nodded, ignoring Mom's glare. She stepped back, her hands trembling, and rejoined George, who was now surrounded by curious guests asking about me. Aria hovered near Sean, trying to pull him away, but he shook his head, his eyes still on me. "You're their daughter?" he asked, piecing it together. I nodded, my voice steady. "The one they didn't want," I said. His jaw tightened, and he looked at Aria, who avoided his gaze. The crowd's murmurs grew louder, questions about my identity swirling. I didn't need to say more, the seed was planted. George and Ellen stood together, their faces a mix of anger and fear. They'd built their empire on control, but tonight I'd cracked its foundation. I wasn't done yet, but I'd just rewritten the story they thought they'd buried. Later that evening, Felix Grant approached me at the bar. The gala's energy still pulsed around us, but his expression was serious, his voice low. "I'm Felix Grant, former engineer at Parker Enterprises," he said, shaking my hand. "I know what George did to you." I froze my glass halfway to my lips. He leaned closer, his words careful but firm. "Your father spread lies about your skills to tech firms, trying to sabotage your career before it began." My chest tightened, the betrayal cutting deeper than I'd expected. I'd known Dad was ruthless, but this was a calculated move to bury me. "Why tell me now?" I asked, my voice steady despite the anger rising. Felix glanced around, wary of eavesdroppers. "Because you're back, Kaylee, and they're scared." Before I could respond, a woman in a sharp blazer approached. Vivian Ellis, she introduced herself, her handshake firm. "I'm Sean's sister, and I've been digging into Parker Enterprises' latest project." Her eyes locked on mine, sharp and knowing. "Aria stole your tech platform's core algorithm for their new product launch." My pulse quickened. I'd suspected my sister's ambition, but stealing my work, that was a new low. Vivian pulled out her phone, showing me a document, a patent application with my algorithm's framework credited to Aria. "I found this in their legal files," she said. "It's your work, not hers." I clenched my jaw, fury mixing with resolve. This wasn't just personal anymore, it was business. I spotted Aria across the room, laughing with a group of guests, her facade still intact. Sean stood nearby, his face clouded with unease from our earlier talk. I excused myself from Felix and Vivian, my steps deliberate as I crossed the ballroom. "Aria," I called, my voice cutting through the chatter. She turned, her smile faltering as I approached. Sean stepped closer, sensing the tension. "We need to talk," I said, my tone cold. Aria's eyes darted to Sean, then back to me. "Not here," she muttered, but I didn't budge. "Right here," I said, loud enough for nearby guests to turn. "You took my algorithm. You built your new product on my work." Aria's face flushed, her voice rising. "That's absurd," she snapped, but her hands shook. Sean frowned, stepping between us. "What's she talking about?" he asked, his gaze fixed on Aria. I didn't let her answer. "Vivian found your patent application," I said, my words sharp. "My code, my ideas passed off as yours." The crowd around us grew quiet, heads turning. Aria stammered, her composure unraveling. "You're lying," she said, but her voice cracked. Sean's eyes darkened, his trust in her visibly fraying. "Is this true?" He pressed, his tone hard. Aria looked away, unable to meet his gaze. I pressed forward, my voice steady but relentless. "You thought I'd stay gone, Aria. You thought you could take everything I built." She opened her mouth to argue, but no words came. The guests nearby whispered, their curiosity growing. Sean turned to me, his voice low. "You're their daughter, and they let this happen." I nodded, my eyes never leaving Aria. "They didn't just let it happen, Sean. George tried to ruin me from the start." Aria's face twisted, a mix of guilt and defiance. "You left us," she shot back. "You chose your path." I stepped closer, my voice low and firm. "And you chose to steal mine." The air was thick with tension, the crowd now openly staring. Samantha Reed, my best friend, appeared at the edge of the group, her smile wide. "Kaylee, that speech was incredible," she said, oblivious to the confrontation. I nodded, grateful for her presence, but focused on Aria. "Thanks, Samantha," I said, keeping my tone light for her before turning back. She stepped away, sensing the moment wasn't hers. Aria tried to pull Sean aside, but he shook his head, his voice cold. "We're not done here," he told her, then looked at me. "I want the truth, Kaylee. All of it." I nodded, knowing this was only the beginning. The Parker family's secrets were unraveling, and I was pulling the threads. The next morning, headlines flooded the internet. "Parker Enterprises rocked by scandal, daughter's ideas." Stolen sabotage, alleged one article screamed. Vivian Ellis had wasted no time. As a lawyer with a knack for exposing corporate misconduct, she'd leaked the details of George's sabotage and Aria's theft to major news outlets. Social media buzzed with clips from my gala speech, paired with Vivian's evidence of stolen algorithms and George's attempts to blacklist me from tech firms. The Parker family's pristine reputation built over decades was crumbling under the weight of their own actions. I sat in my hotel room scrolling through the articles, feeling a strange mix of vindication and calm. By noon, my phone rang. It was Philip Norton, a prominent investor I'd met at the gala. "Kaylee," he said, his voice warm but direct. "I've seen the reports. I'm pulling my funding from Parker Enterprises." My heart skipped a beat. "Their leadership can't be trusted," he continued. "But your platform? It's the future. I want to discuss a partnership with your company." I leaned back, a smile tugging at my lips. "I'd be happy to talk." I said, my tone professional but firm. Philip's offer wasn't just a win, it was a direct blow to George's empire. The man who'd tried to erase me was now losing the investors he'd courted for years. Meanwhile, across town, Sean was grappling with the fallout. He'd spent the night replaying my confrontation with Aria, her evasions only deepening his doubts. In their Seattle penthouse, he faced her, his voice steady but cold. "You stole her work, Aria," he said, holding up his phone with Vivian's leaked documents. "And you never told me she was your sister." Aria's eyes widened, her usual confidence replaced by desperation. "It wasn't like that," she stammered, but Sean cut her off. "You lied to me, to everyone." He stepped back, his jaw tight. "I'm meeting with a lawyer tomorrow. I need to think about what this means for us." Aria sank onto the couch, her face pale as the reality of losing him hit hard. Back at my hotel, I got a call from George. His voice was strained, a far cry from the commanding tone I'd known. "Kaylee, we need to talk," he said. I agreed to meet him and Ellen at a quiet cafe nearby. When I arrived, they were already there, looking smaller than I remembered. Ellen's eyes were red, her hands clasped tightly. "We're sorry," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "We didn't know how far this would go." George nodded, his face etched with regret. "We made mistakes," he said. "Come back to the family, Kaylee. We can fix this." I looked at them, the parents who'd once turned me away. "George," I said, my voice calm but unyielding, "Ellen, you don't get to rewrite the past. You chose your empire over me." Ellen flinched, tears welling up, but I continued. "I built my own life, my own company without you. I don't need your approval or your name." George's shoulders slumped, his usual authority gone. "We lost sight of what mattered," he admitted, but I shook my head. "You lost me," I said, standing up. "And I'm not coming back." As I walked out, my phone buzzed with a message from Vivian. "The board is reviewing Parker Enterprises' leadership," she wrote. "Your story's changing everything." I smiled, feeling lighter than I had in years. The truth had dismantled their world, not through vengeance, but through the strength of what I'd built. I didn't need their empire to shine, I'd created my own. A week later, I stood in my office overlooking Seattle. The city's skyline sparkled under the morning sun, a reminder of how far I'd come since the night I walked away from my family. I'd made my choice clear: no reconciliation, no looking back. My focus was my company, my team, and the future I'd built on my own terms. The Parker family's world was unraveling, but mine was stronger than ever. I turned from the window, ready to dive into a new project, my resolve unshaken by the chaos I'd left behind. Across town, George faced the fallout of his actions. Another major contract slipped through his fingers, the client citing trust issues after Vivian's exposé hit the news. Parker Enterprises' stock plummeted and whispers of bankruptcy circled boardroom meetings. George sat in his office staring at financial reports, his empire crumbling under the weight of his own decisions. He'd tried to control everything: his business, his family, even my future. But now he was paying the price. His calls to me went unanswered. each one a reminder of the bridge he'd burned years ago. Aria's world was collapsing too. Sean filed for divorce, unable to move past her deception. "I trusted you," he'd told her, his voice heavy with betrayal, before packing a bag and leaving their penthouse. The board, shaken by the scandal, voted to remove Aria as director of marketing. Her name, once synonymous with the company's success, was now tied to theft and lies. She spent her days dodging reporters, her social media accounts silent as former allies distanced themselves. My sister, who'd once mocked my dreams, was now facing the consequences of her ambition. Ellen's attempts to salvage the family's image only deepened her isolation. She hosted a press conference claiming the scandal was a misunderstanding, but the public wasn't convinced. Socialites who'd once flocked to her galas turned their backs, their invitations replaced by cold silence. Ellen's charity boards asked her to step down, citing reputational concerns. She stood alone in their mansion, surrounded by the trappings of a life she'd fought to protect, realizing too late that her loyalty to George had cost her everything. I felt no pity. Her silence all those years ago had spoken louder than any apology. I sat at my desk reflecting on the journey that brought me here. I'd been 19 when they cast me out, labeled me a failure for choosing code over couture. But that rejection became my fuel. Every late night, every line of code, every pitch to investors had led to this moment. I didn't just survive, I thrived. My company was now valued at over $100 million, with new partnerships on the horizon. I'd built something real, something mine, without their name or their rules. The lesson was clear: living true to yourself, even when it's hard, is the only way to find your path. To everyone who's followed this story, thank you. Your support means more than I can say. I've learned that the past doesn't define you unless you let it. You can rise above betrayal, rebuild from nothing, and create a life that's yours alone. What's your story? What's kept you going when the odds were against you? Share your thoughts. I'd love to hear them. Together we can remind each other that our choices, not our circumstances, shape who we become.